But then it kind of this descended into like a horror movie type of vibe. At one point, our guide broke his wrist, and he literally said lines like they were from a movie, like, "Oh, you don't want to be caught in the jungles of Panama at night," and we ended up getting caught in the jungles of Panama in the middle of the night because
Hey, so what's up, fam? This is Ronnie from Finding My Tribe, and here we have a very special guest. We talk all things travel, personal development, and living your best life now. This is what we're about, and I'm so excited because we have a very special guest. It's been a long time coming since we had this discussion. She started her digital nomad experience, and we're going to talk all about that, what made her want to become a digital nomad, and we're going to talk all about her experience. So let's get right into it. Mrs. Ozzy, I'm so excited to have her here. Hi.
thanks so much for having me, Ronnie. It's been a long time coming, y'all. My schedule has been crazy, so thank you for your patience. So excited to finally connect.
Yes, absolutely. I remember I was looking at your videos and you were just so honest and authentic with your experience. So I want to get all into that. First, tell us like a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and what made you want to become a digital nomad.
So, hello, y'all. My name is Ozzy. You can find my YouTube at, I believe, at Amazing One. I'm a little rusty. I've been taking a little break from YouTube, but yes, I'm from the United States, originally from Massachusetts, currently based in Chicago. And I started my digital nomad journey. My timing was kind of horrible. It was the end of 2019. So, right when COVID was popping off, I was like, what really inspired it for me is at the time I had a remote job in 2019 when they weren't really popping like they were. And I felt really lonely. It felt weird to not have separation from home and work. And one of my colleagues at the time recommended I go to Mexico City because it was basically the same time zone, had great food, this great art culture. So ended up hopping over there and ended up quarantining there because of the pandemic. And then I moved to Chicago, which I've always wanted to do. So it kind of worked out. But once my lease ended there, had a new job, completely burned me out. I was the first hire at an early stage tech startup. I was working sometimes like 12-hour days without breaks. And it was just a lot. And I was there for almost 2 years. And I just got so burnt out, and luckily, I got on my financial bag and I started saving. And I just kind of treated myself to a little self-funded sabbatical, and I allowed it to continue on for now. It was originally planned for 6 months, but it ended up being 2.5 years. And that I only had 6 months worth of savings, I will clarify. So being a digital nomad was not only this like a good choice for me financially, but it just allowed me to explore myself while I was taking that break from work. And I was also doing some freelancing as well. But yeah, but I kind of got tired of it. So now I'm back in Chicago, paying rent, being as normal and regular as possible. The most mundane things appeal to me right now. Just chilling, hanging with friends
Okay.
in the summer here.
Very interesting. So, wow. So let's get into remote jobs because a lot of people they're looking for remote jobs and your experience of burnout. Can we talk a little more into
Oh,
that? Because everybody thinks that, okay, once you get a remote job, it's great. Now you can just travel and work. And how is it really? Yes.
ooh, okay. So I've had a few remote jobs. I actually haven't had an office job since 2019 when I had that first remote job. And oh, I think the biggest part of the burnout for me, not only from remote work, but digital nomad as a lifestyle, is like I think it's so easy to not have that separation I mentioned between your work life and your home life. It's great to not have the commute. I'm still like pro remote work for that.
Mhm.
But for some, I think it can really just creep in on the time depending on the workplace, the employers, their sense of boundaries or lack thereof. I think
Right.
that can be a huge issue.
Like, was your boss emailing you a lot at crazy times? Did they not have boundaries? Were they just kind of on top of you? And how
It's
was
hard for me to differentiate because I was the first hire at an early stage startup, and so I was wearing multiple hats. I was leading strategy, operations, customer service. It was a lot. And what made the hours long is because I was the main person on customer service for quite some time. So it was 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. I had to be basically on call, dealing with random people harassing me, upset because
okay?
y'all know what customer service is like. You've probably been on one side or the other. Definitely being on the customer service side definitely increased my empathy, but that alone burned me out a lot. Having a startup environment where there's really no structure, it just took a lot of mental rigor as well. Always getting pings on Slack from boss at all times of the day because sometimes he'd work well late, but I like to work regular hours. It was the work creep was really real for me. But also I think because of my break from work, it's changed my perspective on work and how I would approach work moving forward in terms of boundaries. Because we can talk about burnout with like regular 9 to 5s, but I still definitely experience burnout even being freelance and self-employed. Comes with more freedom, but a lot more frustration in other areas. And similarly with digital nomad life, just traveling around, living out of a suitcase. Ugh, all those flights. You know, time zone change. There's a loneliness factor too if you're traveling alone and you're this constantly in that friend making mode. I think that comes with a specific type of exhaustion too that you might take for granted when you're on the other side just dreaming about travel. So yeah, I feel like I've dealt with a lot of areas of burnout. You can experience burnout even doing the things you love. So it's really all about balance.
Wow, okay. So, where did you first go on your sabbatical and digital nomad experience?
Yeah. So
And
I
you're
quit
a
my
pet sitter
job.
too.
Sorry?
You're a pet sitter too, right?
Oh yes. Oh goodness. Woo, I blocked that out for me. I was looking at, I don't know if you're on Instagram and you see like 1 year ago today, no cheating. And I was looking at mine last week. I was with like my worst dog at the time. She had diarrhea for a month and she was just so exactly. And the owners, of course, never tell you stuff like that until you arrive. And then you're like cleaning up doo-doo all the time, dealing with pet sick.
Uh,
I'm so sorry, Ronnie. I just blacked out this thing about that dog. What's the question again? That dog.
Oh man, that's good. So we'll talk about that, but yeah, so we'll come back to that. But where did you go first on your sabbatical, your first country, and your experience?
When I reflect on the last 2.5 years, it's just so weird. Just thinking about what I was doing a year or 2 years ago from today. So I quit my job in the spring of 2022. And I just stayed in Chicago at first and just enjoyed like summertime shy. I had a great like rooftop with a view of like Michigan. It was great because I still had that like tech startup money and I was just living it up with the freedom. But the first place I went, because when I started my job search in the fall, I actually was looking into some travel hosting jobs. So I made it to the final round of one of them, and I ended up going to Costa Rica for a month. So that's technically the first place I went.
Hmm.
And it was kind of poor planning because then I was actually planning on going to Costa Rica like 6 weeks later to visit a friend. So I went to Costa Rica, came back for like 2 weeks, packed up the rest of my stuff, then went to Costa Rica again. And also on that Costa Rica trip, briefly went to Panama, spent a good couple of months in Medellin, Colombia. And also went back to Mexico City because I love it. I've been going every year basically since 2019. So it's kind of like a nice skipping winter tradition. I still need to get on it for this year though, but Mexico City. And then after that, I started my pet sitting in the United States. And I was in Seattle for a month, Denver for 2 months, and DC for a month. And then I came back to Chicago for some pet sitting too. In total, I think I did about 15-ish pet sits.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
You were like pet sitting back to back.
Yes, I had a whole system. I really nerded out and I have some videos on my channel about this. I use Trusted House Sitters and they have specific hubs where there's a high volume of dogs. And so I just knew to travel in those areas because it was easier to do the back to back to back. And I think the season was in my favor too because I returned to the US in, was it April? Yeah, it was in April. And I was pet sitting from April until like, I think my last pet sit ended in like September. So that season is kind of like the natural travel season in North America because it's summertime. So I think that worked in my favor, just getting all those back to back to back sits. And that's why I was in Denver for so long. There are a lot of dogs in Denver.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to Costa Rica and Panama and Mexico City you love. What is it about those places that you love? And what's something that you don't like about it? Or what's one of your favorite places? Because those are all countries that I want to visit. I haven't been
Oh,
there.
yes.
Haven't been there.
So I love Mexico City. I've been, what, 5 times at this point. And what I love most about Mexico City is that it is such a dynamic place. They have great food, great culture, great art. And that's actually where I started learning Spanish. I
Wow.
actually studied French in high school because I didn't know how to roll my R's back then. But the first time I went to Mexico City, I was living in a co-living, which is basically like a long-term hostel. And one of the managers there didn't know English at all. So we kind of set up a work exchange, not a work exchange, a language exchange where we would practice half the time in English, half the time in Spanish. But he didn't really want to practice English. So we kind of just talked in Spanish the whole time. And that really forced me to grapple with the language. And I think with Mexico City in particular, it's bigger than New York City, which I feel like a lot of US people don't know. And so it's really dynamic, it's really big, and there's just so much to do, so many activities, festivities. But on the downsides from Mexico City, I've been there basically once a year since 2019, so I've seen how the city has changed so much. It's become really gentrified. It's become like the digital nomads have kind of taken over. I'm not even gonna lie, and obviously I'm a part of that, but it kind of this made the experience a little bit less special. I hate to say it, but like the last time I went, for example, I only ran into people from the US, which was very different from my first time when I was meeting people from all over Latin America. So, and Europe and all these other places. But last time I was like, dang, I feel like I'm just in the US. Like going to the exact same neighborhoods, all the same places I went to back in 2019, 2020.
Mhm.
It's really changed. And similarly, I felt on the downsides, that's kind of how I felt about Medellin. I honestly didn't really love it. I really would recommend Mexico City over Medellin because it's just a lot smaller and it doesn't have that dynamic, like diverse activities you can do in Mexico City. When I was in Medellin, it seemed like the culture was entirely like, oh, you're either doing a salsa dance class or a bachata, and there's like no other like social vibes. A really good example of how small Medellin is when I was there, I went into this place for like a salsa social one night, and I ran into my old neighbor in Washington, D.C. I didn't even know she was in Medellin, and this literally happened. I was like, oh, I haven't seen her in 5 years.
Wow.
And yeah, it's really small town, like you can run into people very easily vibes. It's very small.
Wow. Okay. Like Costa Rica.
Ooh, yes. So one of my childhood friends lives in Costa Rica and she's lived there for, I've lost all sense of time, like at least 4 years. Like she got the whole digital nomad visa, all that cool stuff. So she's like living there. Costa Rica is, I guess I've been 2 times in 2 different areas. One for that weird job interview, that was a mess. And then staying with my friend. Costa Rica is, I think I'm more of a city girl, and it wasn't really giving that city vibe. It's really driving dependent. My friend has a car there, so she got to show me around, but otherwise, it's really hard to get around. I actually traveled with a group of digital nomads and I was like on a trial run being a host for digital nomad experiences, and we went to Puerto Viejo, which is on the eastern coast of Costa Rica, And getting there was kind of a hassle. You have to like fly, like I had to fly from Chicago to Miami to San Jose, the capital, and then take like a 6 hour bus to get to. So it was just like a very long travel day. And it was very like beach vibes. And it was like really rustic. I think the place I traveled with just didn't have the right vibe. There were ants in my beds. We had cold water for a whole month. It was bad, bad, bad. But I don't think that's
Oh,
normal. My friend has been there to Puerto Viejo before many times and she loves it. I think I just got really bad accommodations. But or they did because I didn't plan it. It was part of a job interview. But yeah, I like Costa Rican food. I like the beach. I think for me, I just need like more of a dynamic city vibe. I'm kind of at that point in my travel where I like to I think I've always kind of been this way. I'm not like super touristy. I'm more like to just live somewhere, try a lot of food, get a sense of the art, talk to the locals. And I was in a villa with maybe like 20 white people from the US and Europe, mostly white. It was like me, one other black person, and one Asian person. I think that's it. I think everyone else was white. And they ate Italian food the whole month. It was so weird. They were just like not trying to immerse in that way, really into the extreme sports, spending a lot of money going to volcanoes. Like it
okay.
wasn't particularly my favorite. It was nice to visit. I'm glad I got to spend time there, but I wouldn't particularly recommend it. But I would go to see my friend, of course, and maybe she'd take me on better trips in the future.
Interesting. Okay.
Mhm.
Panama, how did you enjoy that?
That was actually a weekend trip on as part of that Puerto Viejo.
Mhm.
And it was really fun. I think that was my favorite part of the whole month because we were not in that horrible villa. We had hot water those couple of days. And we did a lot of fun activities. And oh my gosh, I had like probably the craziest travel experience I hope to have ever. We took like these ATV, like the quad bikes, and did like this jungle tour. But then it kind of this descended into like a horror movie type of vibe. At one point, our guide broke his wrist, and he literally said lines like they were from a movie, like, "Oh, you don't want to be caught in the jungles of Panama at night." And we ended up getting caught in the jungles of Panama in the middle of the night because he broke his wrist. A bunch of the bikes got stuck in the mud. We like literally couldn't move. And as soon as nightfall descended, like all these bats are just like swooping right over your head. There are these howler monkeys. You think they sound cute? Like, ooh, ooh, ah. They're like,
Mm.
they
Ooh.
sound horrific. And then there were these wild dogs literally coming out of nowhere attacking us. Like at one point, the guy like punched a dog in the that's horrible. He punched a dog in the face because it was like literally running after us and attacking us. It was really scary. I was like really wondering, like, damn, is this gonna be how I die? This is gonna be I'm gonna be eaten by a wild dog in the forest of Panama.
Oh my goodness.
It
Whoa.
was beautiful. We were in Bocos del Toro, which is like I can't remember exactly where it is, but we got there from Costa Rica just taking some sort of bus. It was just a few hours, and it's like off the coast, like it's an island off the coast of Panama.
Ooh, that's
That was
spicy.
it really was. Yeah, for my digital nomad journeys, I've only stayed in the United States. Part of it was this being in the same time zone. I was doing a lot of event hosting for US based clients. So it was just nice to not have to work in the middle of the night or have very similar hours and all that. And I've always wondered what it would be like to be a digital nomad with like a full-time job and having that level of financial security and just having more options. But it was
Okay.
an enjoyable experience for what it was. I definitely love Mexico City. I definitely want to keep traveling, but part of it was just really hard, this balancing not working, not this living that freelance self-employed life. It's very bust and boom where your next dollar is going to come from. So that's a bit nerve-wracking and also just moving around all the time. It was just a lot of instability all at once. So for me, was a big driver for my digital nomad burnout.
Let's get into the pet sitting.
Yes.
You started pet sitting. And that was a part of your digital nomad experience. Let's start with, I guess, your first house sit and at
Yeah.
all this.
Technically, my first one was in Chicago because everyone on Trusted House Sitter recommends starting local just
Mm,
so you have a review on your profile.
yeah.
So people know you're like a little bit more vetted and people just are more likely to go with local folks. So yeah, I was taking care of I think she was maybe a 4-year-old bulldog, like a 40, 50 pound dog. Looking back, it was a rough sit because she had hip dysplasia and they lived on the fourth floor with no elevator. So I had to carry her up and down the stairs every time she like went every day. And at one point, I did fall and twist my ankle because it's not super easy to carry a 50-pound dog up and down 4 flights of stairs every day. But yeah, that was a little rough. Looking back, I dealt with a lot of weird situations, but I think the novelty of pet sitting and not having to pay rent kind of this emotionally buoyed me for the first few months. But then this after dealing with so many dogs, so many accidents, and I think the biggest thing is with trusted house sitters or any sort of pet sitting like that, the type of dogs you're taking care of tend to be more anxious because their owners are thinking, oh, I have an anxious dog. I want to minimize their disruption and keep them in their home environment. So there's just a lot of anxious, high need, bougie dogs on Trusted House.
Yeah, bougie, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they have better lives than me for sure. Like
Yeah. Bougie, yes. But wow, okay. So, what was your best house sit and your worst?
Oh, my best was definitely my last one. It was here in Chicago. Funnily enough, I now live like right down the street from where that pet sit was, like a 20-minute walk. The dog was really chill, never barked. She was super sweet and she was really well trained.
Hmm.
She would basically just communicate whatever she wanted by going to a certain part of the house. Like she wanted to went by the door, she wanted to go to the bathroom, cupboard, she wants a snack. If she goes by the front door, she wants her rawhide. It was just super easy to deal with her. She was so sweet and respectful. And the house was also really beautiful, like a nice condo in Chicago, not too far from the beach, and nice little balcony, good kitchen. And my worst was probably that diarrhea dog in, in Washington, D.C. That was a long sit too. It sucks when you get stuck with a hard dog for a long sit. I think that was also the sit I committed to pretty early on in my journey. So I didn't have as strong filters because I started booking my pet sits maybe in like January, February. And this one ended up being in July. So I learned a lot in that January to July. But then I looked at that dog and I was in the description of her needs and I was like, oh no, this dog is very high maintenance. And I just didn't realize that when I committed so long ago. I had to take her to the dog park 2 times a day. She had a really sensitive stomach, and her parents did a lot of things that they shouldn't have done, and they didn't communicate it to me. For example, they were switching her diet, and they did it right before I arrived, so that's why she had the diarrhea. But then it kind of never went away the whole month. And it was just really difficult to troubleshoot that for a dog that is not mine.
Right.
And yeah, she would just randomly just like throw up too. She had a couple of accidents in the house. Oh my gosh. That
And then
was so
the color
traumatizing.
with you in bed.
Not in the bed.
Uh,
Thank goodness not in the bed. Oh my gosh. Ooh.
oh
But
man.
yeah, that was definitely the worst. And she was also this very she was a COVID puppy, so she wasn't really well socialized. She was cool with her parents, but that was it. Like even with me, she wasn't cool until the parents left. But then whenever anyone was around her, she'd be really like aggressive and barky and
Mm,
it's just hard to deal with dogs like that. And also she would just eat random stuff off the street. Like, ugh. She was
wow.
just really stressful. You couldn't really leave her alone, and she was kind of spoiled, so it was really hard to deal with her in so many ways. She could only drink like filtered water.
What?
I know. I promise you, Ronnie, these dogs live better lives than me.
Oh my God. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's crazy. Okay,
And
so
then her owners actually now they told me to put like ice in her water too. Okay.
people bugging.
I know. I couldn't have laughed about this last year, but now I can. Oh my God, that was ridiculous. Do
I never had anything that crazy. Ugh. But
you pet sit as well?
yeah, pet sit, and my last pet sit that I just had got on my nerves.
Mm.
Okay, so I mean, I had coming from Vietnam, I had a pet sit which I loved. Oh my goodness, oh my goodness. I loved her, right? Loved him. It was a him. And then I had another pet sit where this person didn't have any reviews, and
Ooh.
I was coming off that high off of my last pet sit. I was like, oh yes, okay, whatever. Now the dog looked a little strange. This wasn't a dog that looked like a dog. It was like half dog, half pig looking. Okay.
Okay.
But I was just like, oh, it's different. Oh, this is different. And the description, it left out a lot, right?
Oh.
So this pet sit was crazy. The dog wasn't trained. The dog was bigger than what I thought. She didn't like walking. She was aggressive. And I was just like, okay, so that was a terrible pet sit. So let's move on. While you were on the road and you needed to make some money, how did you navigate that? Like, it's like, all right, you want to try to make some income. How did you navigate that?